Hey, good evening. Welcome to RomingerRadio. Carl Rominger here. 717-916-5189. 717-916-5189. I want to get your calls on impeaching President Obama. Let's talk about what's going on there. Anybody following the news knows that President Obama is about to be impeached, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe he's just being sued. See, it depends who you ask. According to the Republicans, we're not impeaching him. We're suing him for dereliction of his duty. And according to the Democrats, Republicans want to impeach Obama. And let's talk about why would the Democrats say that that's what they want to do? Well, because they know the Republicans can't. Why can't they? You can't impeach Obama. Really? You think it's possible? No, I disagree with you. It's not possible. Barack Obama is not going to be impeached over his policies, over Obamacare, over unaccompanied minors coming from Latin America. None of those things are going to result in any truly adverse effect for Barack Obama, quite frankly, because there's no votes for it in the Senate. So while the House could certainly vote for impeachment, and yes, they could force it through. John Boehner might be able to do it. And if Boehner does it, it will be a Boehner. But if he does force it through, and can force it through, or thinks he can force it through, or maybe forces it through, or kind of forces it through, and it gets to the Senate, they're not going to get two-thirds of the senators in the democratically controlled Senate, and many of the Republicans probably wouldn't vote for impeachment at that level, and he would be in the same boat as Bill Clinton, which is why I have a picture of Bill Clinton up on my Facebook page if you go take a look at it. I've got my friend Bill. And actually, interestingly, on my Facebook page right now up front, there's a picture of me and Jennifer Flowers and a picture of Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. I think I got the better end of that swap. But in all seriousness, Bill survived it, right? And I don't think the Republicans did themselves any favor only getting halfway there back in the day with Clinton. And same idea here. They're not going to score points with the American public by impeaching Obama and then losing. Now, if something comes out, if we can get some solid evidence on Lois Lerner, for instance, if the email that doesn't exist but we all wish existed came out that said, oh, well, yeah, go ahead and make sure that you attack those Republican groups, signed Barack, well, then I would expect, and by the way, if you want to get in on the conversation, it's 717-916-5189. Well, then I would expect him to be impeached, most certainly, most surely, most absolutely. But that's not going to happen because those emails don't exist. Political sycophants don't need those kinds of instructions. And even Chris Christie wasn't dumb enough to write anything directly in an email about Bridgegate, at least that we know of yet. But anyhow, like I say, it's not going to happen unless some dynamite came forward of actually illegal activity, not just politics you don't like, or he's using his executive power too strongly. And I'm going to explain why that is and why that's going to fail. Those of you who have been longtime listeners know I do have a legal education. I used to practice as a lawyer, so I have some practical knowledge of the law. I will profess that I never practiced in the constitutional arena in the strictest sense. Although I did raise many constitutional issues over the years in many different cases because that's the very nature of criminal defense work, quite often constitutional arguments and defenses. And I also raised them in some other litigation as well. So what's the Constitution say the House of Representatives' remedy is against an out-of-control president? It's an impeachment. And when they go to court, the judge is going to say, why are you here? And the House of Representatives, through its lawyers, is going to say, well, the president is out of control, and he's doing all kinds of things that are illegal, and we don't like, and we want you to do something about it. And the court is going to say, well, that's interesting that you want us to do something about it. And if you were a person who were being adversely impacted by the president's actions directly, in other words, if he was finding an executive order to have you arrested, or he was taxing your business, or doing one of those, if you're one of those people, then come see us. But you're not. You're the United States Congress. And you are not directly impacted in that sense. But we don't even have to get that far because it doesn't seem like you're directly impacted, but the Constitution said you have a special role. You have the ability to remove the president for doing these things if they are truly so illegal that 2/3 of the House of Representatives and 2/3 of the Senate agree. I think it's 2/3. I think it's 2/3 on each. I think maybe one may only be half. Maybe it's half to impeach and 2/3 to convict, I think. So I better look that up. So my point being, though, and I think I'm being eloquent enough here on this point, my point being, quite frankly, the court's going to say you have the power to remedy this without our help. You haven't exhausted your remedies. Now, if, ladies and gentlemen of the House and the Senate, you had gone forward and got an order of impeachment and, in fact, convicted the president and want him removed from office, and he's holed up in the White House and refusing to leave, we can enter an order because there's now a dispute. But this isn't ripe for action yet. The president hasn't refused to step down after you've impeached him, and you haven't gone forward what you need to do. And furthermore, since you have an adequate remedy, we don't need to craft a judicial remedy for you. So let's talk about this. Republicans who claim they don't believe in judicial activism are going to the court and asking it to interfere in a branch of government over which they already have power. Now, why don't they have power? Well, they don't have power because they don't have enough votes. They don't have enough votes because the American people haven't elected enough Republicans. That's a political problem. That's not a real lack of power. It's just we don't have the votes. Well, if you don't have the votes in a democracy, it means you don't have the majority with you. That's simply what it means. So I just don't understand all this hoopla going on with the impeachment. Just don't quite get it. So my thought on the matter would be that we will see this lawsuit percolating forward with Republicans angrily denouncing the president's illegal usurpation of executive authority, something they never did when George Bush did his signing statements, by the way, which Obama does as well. And at the same time, we're going to see the Democrats officiously complaining that Republicans are trying to slander the president and impeach him and filing frivolous lawsuits and just hating on him, to quote the president. Well, I think they're both right. It's a silly sideshow. We should get back to business. We got to beat up on the Russians, okay? And guess what? I'm not going to hate on Obama for that. He signed some strong sanctions, and he used that little airplane problem to get the Europeans to come around. And the Russians are losing their access to some long-term capital, which is a really big deal, and it's going to hurt them. It's going to hurt them dearly. So Putin's getting it. He's getting it from our president. So kudos to Obama. I'll give him a little loving instead of some hating. Again, to use his terminology, not mine. 717-916-5189. You can't just hate the president because you don't like his policies. And he's not a socialist or a communist just because he's usurping federal power. Usurping federal power has been going on under many presidents for a long, long time. And we are in an important age. We're going to determine whether the presidency remains strong or whether congressional oversight is going to be activated. The Supreme Court recently, of course, said, hey, you can't just do these recess appointments. You've got to do it a little differently. You've got to honor the Constitution a little more carefully. Of course, courts had never quite interpreted it that way before. But long story short is we are in a struggle of federal powers, state rights. It's been a tension in this country since before the Civil War. That's what the Civil War was fought about. Slavery was an issue in the Civil War, but it was a sub-issue of the bigger issue of states' rights, states' powers, and states' remedies. Well, we've got the federal question between the states and the president. We've got and the rest of the federal government. We've got the federal question now between the president and the Congress, who are now running to the courts and asking the judges to do something that they've never done before, asking for a little judicial activism. It's just kind of funny. The guy that looks like a pumpkin is going to be in there saying, I I had a golf summit with him, and he made some promises, and now he's just going crazy. He's just doing whatever he wants. And, of course, we're going to continue to hear about these immigrants and their diseases and their filthy, virus-laden bodies just piling up at the border, threatening America. That's a humanitarian crisis, maybe partly created by Obama, but those kids don't get deported under a law signed by George Bush. It's not so linear, folks. I guess that's the lesson. If you take anything away from my prattle, when I go on the air here and I just talk away, blah, 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 all I want you to leave with, all I ever ask that you leave with is a little notion or a little thought that maybe there's more to the world than these simple answers that the pundits offer up to you. You know, anytime somebody tells you it's simple or it's clear, they're lying, because nothing's simple and nothing's clear. Effects are not linear, and what most people assume to be logic isn't. And I'm not saying that I have the secret. My only secret is I'm at least aware that I don't know squat. I'm at least aware of it. Many of my friends and colleagues, and dear friends at that, are not always fully aware of the limitations of their knowledge. Maybe sometimes the more you know you don't know. If you're going to say that. I guess Dwayne's doing some kind of experiment in terrestrial radio. So he asked me if I was going to be on time. How dare he? How dare you, Dwayne, ask me if I'm going to be on time. Why don't you call in and tell us how your little experiment is going? Or perhaps you've electrocuted yourself in your Marconi moment and you're no longer in the mortal coil. You know, I can work all that radio terminology and, somehow I think I have a feeling the FCC's running around looking for Dwayne right now, trying to triangulate his location. Oh, boy. Pirate radio. Anyhow, that's kind of an inside joke. If you're a regular listener, you'll know that one of our other regular listeners is setting up his own pirate radio station. And maybe unauthorizedly simulcasting me on it, because obviously I would never authorize such a thing. Of course, I wholeheartedly recommend that you spread my diatribe as far as you can by sharing information about this show on Facebook, trying to invite your friends to listen. And I'm ready to get one of you guys to call in on Skype here, because I want to make sure that my connection's working. So it's 717-916-5189. And if you want to talk about, Obama's impeachment, the necessity of impeaching Obama, or whatever it is that you guys think we should be doing here, I'd like to know. Now, of course, we could worry about more important things like the Ebola virus, which is about to explode out of Africa and infect all of us. And, of course, the only thing that slows Ebola down is it's not airborne. Now, you can get it from the sweat, So if you happen to, be at an Eric Clapton concert and he has Ebola and he's sweating, you may in fact be able to catch it that way. That's a kind of a really bad reference to one of his songs. So if you got it, good. That just means you're as lame as I am. So you can literally catch it. You can get in a cab and brush up against some sweaty guy. Imagine that. Imagine a warm environment, a warm tropical environment, getting in the back of a cab in a third world country or quasi-third world country, or a not so much third world country anymore like Nigeria. And you brush up against some sweaty guy, and 2 weeks later your eyeballs are bleeding out. Well, it can happen. And so it's a pretty contagious disease. What it doesn't do, it doesn't go airborne like the flu does, okay? Now, when I say it doesn't go airborne, I mean if I when I talk to you, then that's airborne, right? Because I'm spraying the salivas. Probably some cheek cells and everything else in there too. So when that stuff starts hitting you, that's airborne kind of. But really airborne is when it just sort of gets up in the air and can be contracted because it just drifts across the room. Ebola doesn't do that real well. It doesn't get up and walk around the same way the flu does amongst people. If you're in the same house with somebody who has the flu, it's hard not to catch it, even if you don't touch him and you avoid contact with fluids and all that stuff, because it really does move through the air very efficiently. Ebola does not. But should Ebola mutate just a little bit and become an efficient air-moving virus? And remember, the more people that are infected and the more times it's transmitted, biological organisms are always experimenting. It's called evolution, right? The theory of evolution. Things evolve. Well, they definitely, even if you don't believe in evolution, probably Don Stevens doesn't, but if you don't believe in evolution, or you do, it doesn't really matter. All you need to know is that organisms, through sexual reproduction, are constantly mixing their DNA, and through mutations, non-sexual organisms are constantly changing their DNA. And things like viruses that replicate in the trillions, all those little bad copies, lots of little good copies, lots of little bad copies. Every once in a while, one of those bad copies is just a little bit more efficient at infecting the next cell or traveling somehow. And so what they do is they just throw, a billion spores at the problem. And every one of those cells that burst, all these little gazillion pieces of virus come out, and some are the same, and some are just malformed a little bit. And maybe their surface proteins are a little different, or their mRNA is sequenced just a little bit differently. Maybe you've got the Ebola virus festering in your cells, and a sunspot erupts, and a little bit of high-energy radiation leaks through the atmosphere, or a cosmic ray, a gamma ray, or a X-ray comes shooting down through the atmosphere and ionizes, the virus's mRNA inside of you. All these little things can change it, tweak it. And then it just, one catches on. And these things arise. And that's why diseases change over time. That's why the flu comes in different varieties. That's why AIDS keeps changing its surface proteins. Well, this nasty little guy, Ebola, he hasn't really been given a chance yet. Ebola has not been given the chance it deserves yet to...
okay, Carl.
Are you on the air, Don? Or Dwayne?
Yeah.
Ah, exciting. Now, hold on a second. I want to finish my thought about Ebola here. So the Ebola doesn't have a chance to experiment yet. It doesn't have a chance to get out there and try reproducing 100,000 different ways or 1 billion different ways. But now that it's in humans and growing and it's going through more and more cycles, we're talking about almost mathematically infinite permutations, and that's how Ebola is going to go airborne on us. All right, Dwayne, go ahead. I'm done talking about airborne Ebola.
Hey, my little experiment's working just fine.
Cool.
So you're hitting 3 more people definitely than you did before.
So I've got Don, Lucinda, Dwayne, and 3 more people. That's good. That's a start.
Well, hey, every little bit helps, and this is my maiden voyage,
Well,
but so far it's working real well. I'm out cruising around the neighborhood right now, just kind of seeing what's going on.
Ah, very interesting. Very interesting. So you and of course, as I said earlier, I don't authorize the rebroadcast of my signal on a pirate signal, of course, because that would be crazy. But if
I don't know what you're talking about.
But should somebody do something like that, I'm certainly not going to waste a lot of my breath or time going out there to figure out where it's happening, when, how, or where. So, what can I tell you?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you don't know what I'm talking about. That's for sir.
I don't know.
I don't even know who I'm on the phone with. I don't even know why I called this number. You called me.
Who is this? Is this AT&T operator?
Yeah, if it was, you would be caller number 347 in the queue, and your approximate wait is 2,700 minutes.
Right.
So
anyway,
I don't think, because I was talking about the impeachment of Barack Hussein Obama earlier, and I don't think anybody really wants to go forward with the impeachment because they can't get the votes. I mean, that's the problem, Dwayne, right?
Well, the Dems ain't going to do it because I think the Dems are running scared that, they already got themselves so screwed up for this coming election. The only chance they got is all these immigrants coming in, are going to be. I don't know why the Republicans won't do it, because really, well, okay, yeah, I think he should be impeached, but then I kind of felt that way about the last probably 3 or 4 presidents that we had. So, I'd like to think that a president could at least know what the Constitution is and know how to follow it, but evidently they don't have a clue.
Well, and of course, the Constitution...
Or they don't want to have a clue.
The Constitution is a very complicated document, too, let's not forget. It's hard to say exactly what it really means, and I know people get mad at me for saying that, but A lot of it, it doesn't come with a definition section. So it's open to some interpretations.
It's open for some interpretations, but let's face it, them people that we supposedly quasi-elect to represent us, they can't even get close to the interpretation. Look at everything that's going on all the time. It's just ridiculous. Just like what you were making a little remark about what I'm trying. Don't I have a First Amendment right to, I don't know if it's my first, but don't I have kind of a right to, use some frequency that's not being used by anybody else, and just put something low key out there for some people to enjoy. I mean, shouldn't I have that as a fundamental right?
It would be more fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and everything I do in life seems like requires a license or this or that, and it's like, where did all this come from? I mean, come on.
Well, but the idea is that the airwaves are a public asset, and just like a river, we can't just let everybody take the water out at the head of the river. We've got to figure out how to divvy it up, and so these licensures are a way of divvying it up and creating the most or best economic opportunities. And that's the theory.
Right.
How we use spectrum may change in the future.
And I'm not out trying to drown out 10,000 watt stations either. I'm just doing my local little community here.
The government also has a vested interest in keeping certain frequencies to themselves so that they can use them for military purposes, and probably also so that we don't know what the aliens are actually communicating. So, and not the illegal aliens. I'm talking about the Martian aliens.
Right.
So, by the way, Dwayne, we've got another caller on the air with us. Mystery caller number 2. Who are you and where are you from?
I'm calling from Harrisburg. Thanks for the show, Carl.
Hey, thanks, man. What's going on?
Just responding to the topic that you brought up again, the Ebola spread.
Yeah. What do you think?
What are the implications of a vector getting into the United States and having contact with the general population?
The consequences of getting Ebola into the United States are downright scary. Fortunately, it's a disease that's very easily contained, and in a modern society with the quarantine procedures and things like this, and the fact that we have a much more highly educated populace, even though you sometimes walk around town and you see people and you go, there's no way this guy's ever going to understand anything, or you deal with them in the public and that there's a lot of nutbags out there. Nonetheless, our populace is much more educated, much more in tune and connected, and a little more likely to believe the scientists. So unlike some of these countries in Africa where they're having problems where people are storming the hospitals and breaking patients out literally, and or accusing the medical workers of cannibalism literally, and faking Ebola as a means to have cannibalistic rituals, where these things gain traction. And I'm sure you'd have some people here thinking this is a FEMA-made crisis, et cetera, et cetera. But with our media and whatnot, word would quickly spread, and what we would do is literally shelter in place. And you can stop the move of Ebola by simply preventing people from going out and contacting one another, okay? Because it's not really an airborne disease. Two people walking down the street are not going to contract Ebola from each other, odds are. But should it go airborne? Then we have a problem, because then its ability to spread just grows exponentially. And then we're talking about even bigger quarantines and bigger shutdowns. It would be a mess if that happened, and it would be darn scary, without a doubt.
That's true. And some chatter on the underground circuit is that hospitals have already started quarantining certain hospitals have set up quarantine.
They're ready.
Positions, yeah, just in case a case might come through the filter. But what I have also looked at with regard to the Ebola thing is people are speculating that it could be used as a terrorist event.
Well,
What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, we've always worried about a biological agent being tailored, so that's exactly what you would do. If you could have, the flu spreads through society every year, right? And despite the fact that we give out gazillions of flu shots and we do immunize a lot of people, the flu still, millions of people catch it every year, right? Because that's the nature of the flu. So if you could take a virus as deadly as Ebola, or as effective at killing a host as Ebola, and teach it to spread like the flu does. Tweak the genes of the flu to make it more deadly, or tweak the genes of the Ebola to make it spread better. You could create a biological vector that would move through society and kill millions of people in a man-made plague. The Stephen King, The Stand, of course, has a little bit of a metaphysical component, supernatural component to it, but it's a very realistic, this thing escapes from a lab somewhere and begins spreading. Well, right now, the technology to sequence genes and to create things is you can order genetic sequences now online. I can go out and just say I want base pairs that look like this, this, and this, which means if I know what I'm doing and I get the right sequences, I can start tweaking this stuff around. And what I was talking about earlier, Ebola, every living virus, if they're living, every prion, if they're living, every bacteria, which we all kind of agree are living, works the same angle, which is to mutate endlessly, reproduce gazillions of times, and just try to find something that works as well as possible. And all you're doing in the lab is directing that. So we have the ability these days to look at, for instance, a yeast cell, and we have now yeast that we're growing in labs that have an entire synthetic chromosome in them that we created. We edited up the old chromosome, we created a new chromosome, it's reproducing, it's going forward, it's doing all the things it's supposed to do, and doing it even better, arguably, than the original chromosome, which was filled with lots of junk data that's been pulled out. Well, we're at that age where the modern scientists can do that. So yeah, Ebola would make a great weaponized virus, although, again, getting it airborne is the trick. And so maybe Ebola can't be made airborne. Maybe there's something in its nature that doesn't allow that to happen. And maybe that's why it's never going airborne.
I'm not sure of the, with regard to the pathology of Ebola, I'm not sure in its present state if it can possibly be something that
let's talk about
that can be transmitted through the air, just
right.
General contact in the air, right, and carried through the air so that you can just inhale it.
The problem with Ebola, though, is it can be carried through any contact with urine, any bodily fluid.
Right, like sweat. Just casual contact with sweat.
Right.
So
basically, any
close quarters, just any kind of close quarter contact provides a situation.
And I want you to think about these doctors that are getting it. Of course, they're purposefully working around people who have Ebola, right? And they're helping them. But they're wearing all kinds of protective gear and taking all kinds of precautions, and they're still contracting it.
Still contracting it, right?
So it's a very virulent thing when you're in contact with it.
It's going to be hard to navigate some of the information in the next couple of weeks coming through the underground internet with regard to the Ebola, where placement of actual events, incidents of the event is concerned. So there's going to be lots of misinformation and probably lots of paranoia about that. So I think the mainstream media is going to be preying on that energy a little too much. What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, and I don't know where this is going to go. I honestly don't. And the other problem, you run into politics, and politics always slow down the necessary medical responses because nobody wants to do what's absolutely necessary. And the problem is you run into this problem that we ran into with hurricanes, okay? When people do what they're supposed to do, like batten down all the hatches and protect their houses and put up the sandbags and, do all the protections. Then the hurricane blows through, and either it doesn't quite hit where they thought it was going to, or it comes through, but it causes very little damage, and everybody goes, well, that was a lot of work for nothing. So you always run into this problem where nobody wants to do it because they're afraid it's going to be a lot of work for nothing. Like, well, Ebola is really not going to spread. It's really not going to get here. But if you do all your homework right, if you do build the quarantine units, if you get the information out to the medical community, if you establish the networks of care and educate the populace and do all the things, if it does get here, it won't look like a full-blown epidemic anymore because we'll contain it immediately. But there's always this cost, I don't want to really do it. And we can't worry about everything. If we worried about everything, we'd fill in the swimming pools and get rid of our cars, right? Because that would save a lot of lives. But we make choices for cost-benefit analysis. And so probably, and the other thing is there's been no plague. There's been no plague in modern America. We don't have any institutional memory. So, they used to joke in Florida about this. I used a hurricane example again. They went through a series of bad hurricanes. And then everybody in Florida took hurricanes seriously. And then they went through a period of I forget, it was 20-some years maybe before they had another big, maybe Andrew was the first big one after a 20-year lull or something like this. And a lot of people had moved to Florida in that time period who had never experienced a hurricane. And so now
and there was no collective memory of that experience.
They're like, yeah, who cares? And until Andrew ripped through the state, they didn't really get the point of why you prep and why you need to do what you do. Well, it's been a lot longer since, my mom remembers not being able to go out and play because of polio, right? The other parents would say, well, it's too hot today. We want you to go out playing with the other kids. You might catch polio, blah, blah, blah. So you actually altered the way you did things because you might catch a communicable disease, particularly a bad one. Well, we haven't had anything. The worst thing we have is, hey, make sure you put some Purell on your hands because you might catch a cold. Or, you might get diarrhea if you drink the water. Yeah, you might, nobody around here goes, well, you don't really want to go out near that lake because they've got tsetse flies out that way and you might die. You might get the sleeping sickness. Or you don't want to go out in that swamp because you might get the yellow fever and die. We don't have that in this country. We haven't had that in forever. So we have no fear of disease, no real fear. We have lots of fear of disease. Americans are neurotic. It's like Woody Allen. But we have no real fear of real disease because we haven't really experienced it. So it'll be very fascinating because a lot of the population is not going to relate to the actual dangers that would exist. And they're going to assume, oh, well, they have medicine in these days. Well, Ebola has no treatment, kids. None. It's palliative care, and they treat you, and then if you happen to survive, you survive. But there's no known effective standard treatment for Ebola. There's lots of maybe experimental things they could do, but even right now, they're not using the experimental drugs in most instances because it doesn't meet the protocols. You can't do an experiment like that per se. So they got to work that out too. So I don't know. But I worry about it, and I worry about it because you can see these outbreaks occurring, and it's only a matter of time. Maybe we're wrong about Ebola. Maybe a year from now it'll be gone from Africa. Nobody will be noticing it. But maybe it'll be the SARS virus out of the Middle East that springs up. Or maybe it'll be the H1N1 again. Or maybe it'll be the avian flu.
That's right. But those viruses and their impact on the population is significant, but it pales in comparison to the effects that Ebola has. And especially, I know there's palliative care where you can provide for the patient and encourage the Constitution, fight the disease on its own and possibly make it through. But Ebola has just such a devastating death rate that it is at a different group from influenza-type diseases.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely.
Hey, Carl, I got a question.
Yes, go ahead, Dwayne.
What brought all this Ebola on all of a sudden here? Where did this? Where did it come from?
Okay, well, we don't know exactly where Ebola comes from, but they believe it
but I mean this round of it.
Yeah,
you know
I understand. I understand, but they believe it comes out of the jungle, and that it may be a reservoir species of some sort out there. So in these African nations, again, now think about some of these nations. There's some very rural areas. Now we have rural area here where people eat possum, right? I've eaten possum and muskrat, but in certain rural areas out in the jungle, they have what they call bushmeat trade. And guys just go out in the jungle and they kill whatever animals they can find. And I mean whatever animals they can find. Little ones, big ones, small ones, reptiles, fish, mammals, monkeys, apes, zebras, squirrels, mice. I mean, any piece of meat you can find running around in the woods or the jungle or the Sahara or the Sahel, but mainly in these jungly areas. And that's the bushmeat trade. And so you go to the restaurant and they serve bushmeat, and it's whatever, 3 guys drug out of the jungle last week. And eating those meats is where they think Ebola comes from, or how it gets into the human population. And once it gets in, obviously, it spreads very easily. And so that's where it comes from. But this is the biggest Ebola breakout in history. The Marburg virus, as I think it's sometimes referred to, or as a similar virus, had a breakout in the 70s. And they had some serious issues with it. But nothing like this. And this is the first time Ebola has made it into some of the nations it's made it into. And it's starting to make it into populated areas. And it's killing, people with all the modern science we have and all the technology we have. These doctors are getting exposed. There's dying, nurses are dying left and right. The top doctor for, I think, Liberia or Nigeria or one of the countries over there, he's dead. Top Ebola doctor. We've got an American doctor from Doctors Without Borders who's being treated right now and is allegedly doing okay. Although I won't believe it until I see him walking and talking on TV. So it's just sort of crawls out of the jungle periodically. And that's the thing. There's believed to be gazillions of other diseases out there, many of which will never affect human beings. If you pick up a handful of soil, there's a billion bacteria in there, and most of them are never going to hurt you. And then a kid goes swimming in a lake in Florida and gets a form of amoeba that happens to eat brains and dies because it goes up your nose and gets into your brain. But your odds, you could drink that lake water and suck that lake water up all day, every day for 10 summers in a row and never get one. And then another day, somebody's unlucky enough that the wrong amoeba goes up their nose and just happens to grab root and gets into the brain, and the next thing you know, you're dead. It's a big biological soup out there. So this Ebola just sort of harbors in the jungle somewhere. Now, why it came out this time? Now, of course, you can always go with the conspiracy theory that maybe somebody released it down there, right? If I were a radical terrorist from the Middle East and I wanted to cover my tracks and I could weaponize Ebola, right? Maybe the thing to do would be to release it in an area where it's traditionally known to spring up, right? And then also selectively release it later into more my target country or my target population a little later, so that it looks like it's spread from A to B. But the way they sequence these things these days, they've allegedly already sequenced this, and this looks familiar. In other words, it doesn't look like it's been weaponized or changed or anything like that. So it's probably just a virus that crawled out of the jungle on the back of some kind of animal that probably got ate by somebody. And of course, it wasn't cooked thoroughly. They tell you, eat your steak well done if you don't want to catch a disease. I've eaten 1 million pounds of beef half raw. So far, I haven't caught anything that I know of, but sooner or later, I could get the mad cow.
Well, and then, too, in this day and age, in this society, the way we travel, just even intercontinentally and, country to country, I guess that just can make that whole problem worse.
It is actually the grave concern for, the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic, It's the idea that something can just begin spreading all over the place. And so imagine a guy with an airborne disease goes into the airport, right? And let's assume he gets into the airport and he stands in line with a bunch of people. And if it's airborne, he might be infecting, 20 or 30 people in the security line in the time it takes him to get through it. And then he goes over to the Sam Adams at the Baltimore airport and drinks a couple Sam Adams. And 2 guys at the bar catch it, as does the bartender. And then he gets on the plane and he infects, 15 to 20 more people on the plane. Now, you know how these planes go, right? That plane lands in Charlotte or Atlanta because there's no thunderstorms that night keeping the planes out of Atlanta. Cross your fingers. It lands in Atlanta, and those 20 people he infected on the plane then dispersed to a bunch of other planes, right? Now, they're not really producing anything yet, so they're not going to infect anybody, but they go to 20 corners of the country, right? But like most travelers, most people who are going out on a flight are going to come back on a flight. So they go do their 1-week vacations, and now they become carrier monkeys themselves, and now they all fly back on their flights. It just can spread very, very quickly if it's virulent enough and it's airborne enough. And that's the one.
So you never really know.
No, you don't know. You don't know. And that's why you can't stop from catching a cold or the flu, because we don't, despite all our protections, we can't completely shut them out. And now generally speaking, you have to think about it this way. It's really not in a virus's best interest, okay, to kill its host, right? Because if a virus kills its host, it's dead too. It's not going anywhere, in theory. So let's talk about a virus that learns to hijack the human body or any other animal's body. It's called the rabies virus, right? What does the rabies virus, quote, and we'll say, know how to do? What's its adaptation? Well, it causes you to do what? Foam at the mouth, right? Well, what does foaming at the mouth do? It means you've got lots of fluids in your mouth that are full of virus particles, right? And what else does it do? It turns on your aggression. It actually attacks your brain in a unique way. Your nerve goes right to the brain and attacks the brain in a way that causes you to become aggressive and bite. And so that little virus, just the way a beaver builds a dam, knows to hijack your brain, get inside your brain, and cause your mouth to foam and for you to bite other animals. And what does that do? That guarantees that the virus survives, right? Species goes on, right, because you now infect the next animal that goes on to infect the next animal. So there has to be a survival strategy, because if something is just dead, if you just die in your tracks and you don't spread the virus, that's no good. So a virus has got to keep you alive long enough to allow you to spread the virus. Now, it doesn't mean the virus is going to think it completely through and not eventually eat up an entire population, if it could. But what it's really trying to do is continue on. Maybe not individual particles of the virus continue on, but the virus as lineage can continue on through whatever means. There's a worm. There's a worm that you can get that burrows you ingest it in water as a little larvae, and it works its way up into your arm or your leg or your skin somewhere, and it gets real close to the end, and then it creates a sore that feels like it's on fire, right? It feels like it's just on fire. And what do you do when you're on fire? What do you want to put on fire?
You want to try to get rid of it or put it out? Or
What do you put on fire? You put water on fire, right? And you get an urge. You get an urge to dip your arm or your leg in the water because of this incredible burning sensation. And that urge, when you do it, the worm explodes the wound open and all its eggs fall into the water. Okay? And then the next guy comes along and drinks the water, and he gets the same thing. And it can live in humans, and it's in Africa. It's a terrible disease, okay? Anyhow, here's my point. There's all kinds of animals that have figured out strategies how to hijack, but notice it doesn't really want to kill you outright, right? It just wants to make your life miserable as possible to get you back to a pool of water so you deposit the larvae in the right place. So all I'm trying to say is it's not like a virus can plan this out, but sooner or later a virus is going to emerge that will move very efficiently through humans, and it doesn't mind having a high kill rate. But it doesn't want to have a 100% kill rate, right? Because that lowers its chances of spreading. So that's why I'm worried about this Ebola, learning that it has a 60% death rate as opposed to a 90% death rate. If that's not the doctors, and that's just the virus's fine-tuning its adjustment, lowering its own kill rate, that means it's learning. And what it learns next may be how to transmit differently. And that's what I'm worried about.
That's scary stuff, Carl.
Yeah.
Or it can be scary stuff.
But we have more important things to worry about besides Ebola, like getting the president sued by the Republican Congress for no other purpose but to show that we can file a lawsuit and say, bad, 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 but we're not going to use our constitutional powers to touch the president. So, we've got that to worry about, much more important than Ebola. And far more important than rebuilding our caving in infrastructure of bridges and water mains and sewers and all that good stuff. Why would we worry about that?
I like how the state of Pennsylvania addressed that issue.
Yeah.
They just went to all the bridges and put lower weight signs on them. Yeah, we fixed it. Yep, now you trucks can't go over them anymore. Yep, it's fixed. All good now.
Right. All our bridges are 100% versus their weight limit.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
That's pretty amazing. Pretty amazing when you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep, and I noticed that, my dad came from the trucking industry, and so I always look for things like that. And on the road that I live on, there's, 3 bridges, and what they do here, a year or so ago, lower weights, okay, that fixes everything.
Yeah, we can buy another 10, 15 years.
What? Yeah, while Corbett increases my fuel tax by, some exorbitant amount of money, to fix all the... the infrastructure,
the bus lines to run
right.
the bus lines in Philadelphia. Which, by the way, did you notice the Turnpike said they're going to have to raise their tolls again, and for what reason? Not because they need the money for the Turnpike, but because they have to provide this money to the Pennsylvania legislature that they've been told to raise. So the Turnpike is getting raped. So that your tolls on the Turnpike are designed now to help pay for the roads that don't have tolls.
Right.
So
it's a vicious cycle that just seems to never end.
If you're lucky enough to live up on Interstate 80, you can drive on the interstate every day toll free. While if you're lucky enough to live down here in central Pennsylvania and you can't use 81 but have to use 76 to get to work, you can pay the toll every day to help keep 81 and 80 and 79, and I can go on and on toll free. And I'm not a big proponent of tolls, but
in the meantime, if I don't want the Easy Pass in my car, I get to pay even more being a cash customer.
Right. Well, and I'm not going to bust. I'm not going to bust on state workers, but the Turnpike jobs are probably completely unnecessary, or at least many of them are. In New York State, now in Pennsylvania, they've at least have machines to dispense the tickets. In New York State Thruway, you get a human being hands every ticket to somebody. Think about that. Every ticket at the I-90 gets handed to you because, it's a job, and jobs are what government's for.
Right.
I guess.
And they don't have to be productive.
Right. You just need a job.
Right. Unlike the people I hire, I expect them to be productive.
Well, my friend, I'm going to get out of here, so it is a wrap. Thank you for calling in. Don't catch Ebola.
I'll try not to. Yeah. And the next time, maybe Sunday night, I got a little thing in the local township that I want to run by you.
All right, I'll be here. I will be here Sunday night. 8. Well, you know what? I might be at my brother's house, so it might have to be next Wednesday because I may do a rerun on Sunday, only because my brother's having a housewarming party in the other end of the state. So depending on my mood, I may not want to break up with the family and do that. I might want to. And remember that chimpanzees can give you Ebola, okay?
I'll remember that. I'll stay away from the chimpanzees.
Yeah, no more chimpanzee meat. Which I think is chimpanzees. We didn't hear from Don Stevens at all tonight, which is very disappointing. The only thing I can think is, everybody on Facebook just got so down on him that he's just at home crying. But
do you think that's what it is?
No, actually, he's probably working or something like that. I know he does actually have a job. He apparently likes to pay taxes, from what I can tell on the hippie do-gooder liberal schvent that he has, and how he seems to especially hate gas guzzling cars. So I assume he drives like a Prius or a Pius or whatever they call those little electric cars,
or a smart car or something stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And I
bet he drives.
Love the gas guzzlers.
I bet he drives a little. I tell you, I bet he does drive a little smart car around.
Maybe I'll ask him on Facebook sometime what car he drives. He won't give me an answer, but I can ask him.
He won't
anyway.
give you a real answer, but you'll get an answer.
No. Yeah, you'll get it right.
All right. Well, Dwayne, thank you for listening. And, of course, in the meantime, all right, brother. In the meantime, don't forget.
And this is your first time on the air since HP days.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I don't want to know. All right. Take care. So, yeah, you go to, but thanks. Go to CarlRominger.com. Check out. We got some good stuff posted up there. I got a little bit about the impeachment, whatever. Got a picture if you want to see it. Of course, you can follow me on Facebook. It's Carl with a K, Rominger, R-M-I-N-G-E-R. Also on Twitter. I always do some exclusive content on Twitter. And as always, I'm happy to have you on board. And don't forget to share this show with your friends, family, and acquaintances if you have any. God bless and have a good night.